Will the secretary please call roll?
Commissioner Becerra, Commissioner Verino,
Here.
Commissioner Alderete, Vice Chair Contreras-Leo,
Here.
Chair McLaughlin,
Here.
Commissioner Mendoza,
Here.
Commissioner Nguyen.
Here.
Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you. We'll all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Vince, would you lead us?
Absolutely. Everybody face the flag. Ready to begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, we will hear public comments. Does a member of the public have any public comments on non-agenda items? You can fill out a card for request to speak from the secretary, and after introduction, have 3 minutes to speak, unless an extension of time is granted by the chairperson. I have one card here for public comment. Dale Helvig.
Good evening. My name is Dale Helvig, and I've been a resident of Park Santiago for the past 27 years. As you know, there are several projects that are proposed or going on around the North Santa Ana area. In total, they represent over 1,500 multi-family unit or hotel rooms. The most interesting fact is not one of these projects is next door to a single-family home, except for the proposed 2525 main residential development, which appears to be a case of spot zoning. A sunshine meeting was held November 15th for the proposed development of these 517 units. The almost 500 people in attendance at this meeting were opposed to the project. We need to support the vision we had for our current businesses and museums along Main Street. At the past City Council meeting, there was discussion about the negative impact M1, M2, high and low zoning is having on the adjacent residential zoning and what needs to be done to correct this issue. The 2525 main residential development rezoning request is just as bad. It puts it right next to residential areas. The city has been doing good work over the past few decades, so I hope we don't go backwards by approving this project once it comes to your committee. City leaders are soliciting for businesses to come to Santa Ana. Don't allow a project to remove a great work location. It comes down to the value we place on residential areas versus the money the city generates with high-density living spaces. The Santa Ana Strategic Plan vision that was adopted on March 18, 2014, states, "The city vision sets the focus for the future." It goes on to mention things like having a safe and healthy community, neighborhood pride, and quality government services. Your mission mentions, among other things, at ensuring a high quality of life for residents. The residents of Santa Ana have a lot of neighborhood pride, and the North Santa Ana Preservation Alliance opposes any rezoning and general plan amendment for the 2525 main residential development, regardless of any future design changes proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a public comment at this point in time? Hearing none, we'll close the public comments at this point. I'd like to move to the consent calendar. At this time, for the Commission to consider the matters of the consent calendar for items A and B. Do any members have any corrections to the minutes or items they wish to pull for the separate discussion or abstain on? Yes. Good. Okay. So there's a typo with regards.
When we adjourn, it says the next meeting is November 13th, not the 27th.
All right. Thank you. For the record, Commissioners Alderete and Becerra have requested an excused absence for tonight's meeting. There are no other excused absence at this point in time. Do I have a motion to consider items A and B, and do I have a second?
Second.
Motion?
I was going to motion consent.
Motion, second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 5-0, with the absence of Aldereti and Becerra. I'd like to move on to the business calendar. Ali, are you all set for your, okay. This is the time and place for the public hearing on item number 1, mitigated negative declaration / environmental review 2016-165, general plan amendment number 2017-02, and amendment application number 2017-03 to allow the new affordable housing development located at 2223 West 5th Street. Do any of the commissioners at this time have anything they wish to disclose regarding this item? Okay, Ali?
Thank you, Chairman McLaughlin. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Up for discussion tonight is the Tiny Tim Plaza redevelopment project proposed at 2223 and 2237 West 5th Street. This project entails an environmental review, a general plan amendment, as well as an amendment application to change the zoning, which I'll get into in greater detail as we go along. So the project itself proposes to construct a 51-unit affordable residential community at an existing shopping center. The shopping center is known as Tiny Tim Plaza. There's 2 commercial buildings on it and a corner automobile service building. As part of the project, that corner automobile service building would be demolished and the affordable residential community would be built atop. The applicant is also proposing to rehabilitate and remodel the 2 existing commercial buildings on the site at the north and the east, and to construct site improvements, including new landscaping, new hardscaping, and street improvements. The project requires a general plan amendment. I'll get into the second one in a moment, as well as to rezone existing parcels from their residential to the specific development zoning designation. So as described before, this is the property that is the subject of the application. The 2 commercial buildings are visible with the gray roofs to the north and the east, and the existing service building for automobiles is to the southwest. Running north-south is Holly Street, and running east-west at the base is 5th Street. This is the site as it appears today. The building in the foreground is the proposed building for demolition, atop which the project would be constructed. The buildings in the rear are the ones that the applicant is proposing to rehabilitate and remodel with new storefronts and new building materials. The applicant is also proposing to reconfigure the parking and to install new landscaping and new hardscape materials throughout. These are some renderings of the project. This view shows the building as it would appear, showing the residential building at 4 and 3 stories, as well as some of the existing commercial buildings on the project site. This is a view looking from the proposed residential building toward the area between the 2 commercial buildings on site, where the applicant is proposing to construct a new plaza, a Zocalo feature, and to relocate the canopy that serves the automobile repair facility to this part as a shade structure for a proposed sort of gathering stage area. These are the proposed renderings as the project would appear from 5th Street, showing the building overhead with the residential units, and then the proposed community space, leasing, office, mailroom, and all that on the ground floor along 5th Street. So this is the site plan of the overall site. The applicant's proposing to construct the building at the corner, the new building. The gray that you see is the proposed parking. It would be ground level, atop which the building would sit with the residential units. The areas in that ochre color are along 5th Street and Holly. Those would be the community spaces, as well as the mailroom, leasing, office, and other sort of on-site services. The brown and reddish colored buildings, those are the existing commercial buildings that would be renovated and rehabilitated as part of the project. This landscape plan now takes the focus away from the buildings and shows the proposed landscape and hardscape improvements. So in green is the trees that are proposed for the project. Along the rear edge is a strip of dark green that's proposed to be an outdoor garden, community, urban food farm for the project. And then between the two commercial buildings in white is proposed to be that plaza gathering stage area. In addition, in front of the building to the east with those gray stripes, that's proposed to be a kind of hardscape outdoor gathering / outdoor dining area for the buildings. So when staff receives an application for a rezone, especially one that entails establishing a specific development zone, we have to consider several important items for analysis. So the first is neighborhood compatibility, quality of project, contribution to the community, general plan consistency. Secondly, we also have to consider neighborhood feedback. And thirdly, how the applicant is communicating with the surrounding community. So for this specific project, the analysis found that the project is compatible with the surrounding community. It's mostly a residential community, and this is introducing another residential use. It's also maintaining a community shopping center that has served the area since 1962. Secondly, the quality of the project. Regardless of market rate or affordable, staff always holds applicants to a standard wherein, hopefully from the street or interior, you would never be able to tell what type of project it is. That's the level of sort of amenities that we expect for any sort of project. This project is proposing almost entirely 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units. They are definitely family oriented. There's no studio and there's no 1 bedroom units. Originally, the project did come in with a very high amount of studio and 1 bedroom units. And after hearing the city's needs for family-oriented housing, the applicant revised his project to completely eliminate the studio units and the 1 bedrooms and feature only 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units. Secondly, contribution to the community. This project is unique in that it's not just an application to build the affordable residential community, it's also proposing an extensive rehabilitation and renovation of the existing shopping center. So that shopping center has not really seen any major reinvestment since it was completed in 1962. And since then, up until 2017, today, it's been 55 years that this project site has been mostly asphalt and these buildings with some minor landscape renovations done a few years ago. But other than that, this is the first time that an applicant is coming in on this scale to propose this level of enhancements to the shopping center. And finally, general plan consistency, which is probably the most important in many ways. The housing element from 2014 identified this site and a handful of others along 5th Street as housing opportunity sites. These were areas in the general plan identified for potential infill housing to satisfy the city's housing needs. This site in particular was identified because of its proximity to the future streetcar line that's going to be under construction and the future stop at Rate and 5th Streets, which is about 0.3 miles away, so a third of a mile away from this site. Also important is the feedback from the community. The applicant held a sunshine ordinance meeting very early on for this project on February of 2017, and the community did share its strong concerns about parking and the gang activity in the neighborhood. The applicant took the feedback and a lot of other feedback and points made at the meeting and reapproached the project bearing in mind a lot of these points. So originally the applicant had proposed a lesser parking rate. This site is also eligible for that 0.5 half a space per unit parking that the state allows. The applicant, even though he's eligible for that, is proposing more than 3 times that amount of parking in order to assist with satisfying the community's concerns for parking. Secondly, the community did express its concerns about gang activity in the area, and with all these new plazas and courtyards and Zocalo creating a hangout spot for the gangs to gather. And upon reaching out to the police department, we did find that gang activity in the area has stabilized in the past few years. It hasn't gone down or it hasn't gone up. But the police department, as well as planning, does consider any new investment, any new sort of permanent use brought to the area as a step forward in helping to eliminate gang problems in any neighborhood. So the police department voiced its support for this project. And then finally, since the Sunshine Ordinance meeting, the applicants followed up with Artesia Pilar by attending 2 additional community meetings since to provide updates. One was exclusively with the community and another was a joint meeting with another neighborhood association that the applicant can provide further details on during the public hearing. So we already went over the general plan consistency. and the reinvestment in the property, the project was also reduced in scale a little bit to not have it be so tall towards the rear in those single-family homes. And then finally, there was a big concern, especially among the current tenants of that shopping center, as to whether they would be displaced as part of the renovations and the rehabilitation. And other than the underutilized corner building that will be demolished for this project, the applicant does not have any plans to displace or relocate any of the tenants, so they'll continue to exist and serve the community as they've been for the past 5 decades. For this project, the applicant and the city also had to prepare an environmental document. For this project, after going through that initial study checklist of identifying potentially significant impacts, the mitigated negative declaration was identified as the most appropriate environmental document for the project. Basically, the analysis showed that all the impacts from the project could be mitigated using existing codes, existing procedures, except one, which involves having to red curb certain portions of the project for visibility for motorists and cyclists and pedestrians. And finally, there is a side component with this project, and that is to modify the general plan on an unrelated item. It's a cleanup item to basically create better consistency between the museum district, commercial zoning district, where the Bowers Museum is, and the district center general plan designation, which they both have the same sort of uses in mind for that corridor, so it's just an administrative cleanup. That's also a part of the action tonight. So based on this presentation, the analysis, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommended the City Council approval of the environmental document, the general plan amendment, and the zone change to establish the specific development zone. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Ali. Does the commission have any questions of staff? Lynette?
Ollie, thank you for the presentation. So looking at the rendering of the project, it looks like there's a new wall that's going to be built on the back, especially where the open space is. Is that correct? And then behind the existing commercial building?
Are you referring to the east or the north or both sides?
Both sides.
Typically, the applicant constructs a new wall as part of any project like this, but in the event where the existing wall is relatively new or satisfactorily built in height and quality, there may be an opportunity to use existing portions of the wall. So the applicant, during the building plan check phase, will get down into more specifics and identify which stretches need replacement and which parts should be left intact or could be left intact.
Won't that be a little odd if it's some are and some aren't, and some's older and some's newer?
Aesthetically or quality-wise or?
Aesthetically.
Aesthetically, we try to blend it in as much as possible to make sure the materials match, but if that's impossible, then a new wall is often required.
Okay. And there's going to be a new signal built at the corner of Holly and Fifth?
There's no new...
Because there's not today. There's no existing...
No, there's no new signal identified here. It's just the street improvements to narrow Fifth Street to slow down the traffic and to build the bulb outs for the pedestrian safety.
The ingress and egress, both on Fifth and Holly, are both the existing driveways that exist today?
The applicant would reuse the existing driveways.
And both in and out,
Mm-hmm.
on both? Okay, and that's it for now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Beatrice?
Thank you, Mrs. Chairman. I read that these proposed low-income housing units are going to be available for those earning between $30,000 to $60,000 a year. But what I want to know is how low-income housing is this project? Is it mid to low, low to low? How affordable is it?
It's, I can let the applicant get into
Well,
better...
I know it says that they'll be paying, 30-60% of the AMI, but that doesn't really mean much to me. So I wanted to know that if the applicant is here, he could answer that question.
Sure. They can answer probably a lot better than I could, but from what I understand, it depends on the size of the household. So you could go anywhere from 2 to 8 individuals, and that would affect the amounts that they would pay per month as part of their rent. So when they get to their portion of the process, they can illuminate, what type of families are being targeted and all that.
And the other question is, I know in the report you mentioned that there's going to be employment centers, or that there are employment centers near. I can't think of any right now. Do you know any names of employment centers near?
Oh, forget, that might be a terminology mix. Employment center in the planning term refers to an area with a high jobs concentration, not necessarily an employment center. Yeah.
But you do have Goodwill close,
Okay,
relative.
really close. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, sure.
We have received the communication indicated that not all homeowner was giving the opportunity to notify or provide feedback on the proposal. Could you, was the Sunshine Ordinance meeting was conducted, and how did the neighborhood been notified about the project?
The Sunshine Ordinance requires that the applicant send a mailing notice to property owners and renters within 500 feet of the edges of the property. In addition, with our in-house resources, we set the applicants up with Scott Kuttner and Margarita Macedonio, our two community liaisons who often contact the neighborhood heads. And so for this meeting, the neighborhood heads and the residents within the 500 feet were notified. And at least 60 individuals turned out for the Sunshine Ordinance meeting.
Great. You was indicated the project provided 3 times more the parking required by the state guideline, which is 0.5 parking space per unit. How many parking will be available at the project, and how many units will be there?
So the project is proposing 51 units and 94 parking spaces for the residents. So that comes to a ratio of 1.84 per unit.
I see. Thank you.
Sure.
Cynthia?
I have questions, and I'm not sure if it's for the applicant or not. It's in regard to the existing tenants that are there now, the businesses. And my question is, what's going to happen with them? Are they going to continue their businesses as usual? And are they going to have to pay higher space? The lease, is that going to change for them? Can you answer some of those questions for me?
The applicant can better speak to that since they own the property now, but we can, go ahead, Brian, that's fine.
Let's hold off until we get finished with staff. Thank you.
So the applicant indicated that there's no plans to relocate any of the tenants. Now, when it comes to the rent that they pay per square foot, those are subject to change over time, whether they elect to raise them right away or raise them gradually over a certain period. That's something that they can answer.
Okay, thank you.
My question, Ali, is that you mentioned this is affordable housing, right? But you used the 0.5 parking. I thought 0.5 parking was senior affordable, and that affordable is 1.
The state, depending on certain criteria being met, has changed its laws to allow 0.5 parking for family or senior, depending on exactly what type of transit is nearby.
So that's a recent change?
That's been on the books, yeah, relatively recently.
Okay. I mean, I just need clarification on that because we've been talking about different numbers for different categories, and I just wanted to understand that. Okay. Lynette?
Can I piggyback off that?
Sure.
That's based on the proximity to transit. Is that to existing transit or proposed transit? Because I know a lot of the presentation is talking about the proposed transit of the guide wire or the...
It's based on existing transit.
Okay, so when we build the streetcar, then that's going to be an enhanced transit.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's based on existing transit.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions to staff? Okay. Let's move on. Would the applicant like to comment at this point in time?
Good evening, Commissioners. I will address specifically the existing tenants. I'm Brian Hendricks with Magis Realty, part of the development team. It's our intent to work with all of the current tenants in the commercial space. It's a nice mix of uses. We have a bakery, a restaurant, laundry, and then few different ancillary businesses. But our intent is to work with them. We're uncertain yet exactly how much we're going to be spending on the improvements. So we'll rents. Every tenant is on a month-to-month lease. There's no long-term leases except for the laundry tenant. But we don't anticipate jacking up rents by huge amounts. If we spend money on improving the property, there may be some rent increases, but we do. Again, we'd like to see the businesses that are there continue to serve the neighborhood.
Okay, and also, the parking for those businesses, is that going to be separated by something?
Yeah, I'll let Brian address.
Okay.
Yeah, my name's Brian Gilshessi. I'm the Executive Director of City Fabric. We're the design team for the project. Ali, could you go back to the landscape slide? So basically the parking that's within the parking garage, that's exclusively for the residents. And then the parking that you see sort of creating an L around the building, those are exclusively for the commercial tenants and their patrons.
So will those spots become available after a certain hour? That
For
perhaps
tenants?
can
You
use,
mean for
and then they
residents?
have to be gone by a certain hour?
That was one of the suggestions that came up during specifically the Sunrise ordinance meeting, and I think that's a really good idea since we're going to be involved in managing the collective property. I think there's certainly an opportunity there.
I would hope so.
And then one of the questions was related to the existing driveways. We basically consolidated the existing driveways. There's currently about a half dozen or so on to the site, and so we're consolidating them to the two. And what that really does is expand the available on-street parking for public access, probably about by 10. So pretty substantial difference.
So how many driveways today?
So
is this
there will be two.
onto Holly?
One onto Holly, one onto Fifth Street.
Right, but what's there today? How many?
Currently,
drive into
there
Holly?
are 3 onto Holly and then 3 onto Fifth Street.
Okay, thank you.
And then there was the question about the wall. So if you look sort of to the north end of the site where there's the landscaping, it's currently service areas for the commercial tenants. It's no longer, I think, viable for a service vehicle, but originally that was the intent. And so to transition that to an urban garden, one of the things that we recognized was that we weren't that unique with the idea. Is many of the tenants adjacent to the property already have like their own produce growing in the backyard. So I think there's an opportunity to explore relationships with those adjacent tenants. And so that might be actually part of that conversation with the existing wall, whether there's even fences, gates between them so that there's actually shared access. So there's a few opportunities as we get further into the design process.
So you're closing off the current access road that's behind the commercial?
Yes.
You'll be closing that off to possibly build a neighborhood garden or?
Yeah, basically urban farm community gardens for either local residents or for the tenants of the commercial spaces. It's a lot less active use than it would be right now as a service lane, and so we figured it was a more considerate transition to the adjacent neighbors.
No, I like the idea. I think it's great as long as the service provider, the vendors that are coming to deliver are not parking on Holly or parking on Fifth to then deliver to the commercial buildings, because then you're going to cause congestion.
No, the intention is that the service will be within the project site. Even the trash it has been brought from, there's currently a trash area at the north end of the site and the sort of east end of the site, and now it's going to be centralized within the project site. So again, trying to be a little bit less impactful to the adjacent neighbors. And then a few of the amenities sort of that you see in the landscape plan is there's actually, if you look at the sort of magenta path around it, it's actually a walking trail. It's about a quarter-mile walking trail meant to be accessible to residents and community members. And then the yellow that's on the ground floor is an outdoor gym with the equipment that you see popping up in some of the parks where it's outdoor gym equipment. And then there's actually the mini park, where the gas station canopy would be a shade structure over the bench, over the stage that faces onto the park. So there's a lot. We believe there's a lot of amenities that are not just for the development and for the new residents, but also for the existing neighborhood around it.
Thanks.
One more comment on the commercial space. We will be demolishing the corner building. That tenant vacated about 6 months ago, so we actually won't be needing to relocate that tenant. We have actually an artist in there now that's going to be doing a studio there until we begin construction. So, and I know there were some questions about rents. Is there anything about rents? Go ahead.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Corey Bannister. I'm with Community Development Partners, part of the development team. And Commissioner Mendoza speaking to the affordability of the project. It'll be restricted to 30% AMIs all the way to 60% AMIs. So that's extremely low income to low income. And for example, a family of 4 that's restricted at 30% AMI, that would be $31,290, all the way up to the 60% AMI, which is still considered low income. For a family of 4, that's $62,580.
Yes, I'm sorry, but how much would they be, how affordable are these units? So I know it's 30% but.
Gotcha. So for, at 60% AMI, a 2-bedroom unit the gross rents would be $1,400. And at 30% AMI for a 2-bedroom, that would be $704. So quite affordable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In regards to, that's can be very attractive, right? I mean, that's quite affordable. Are you going to have a special process in how you assess the applications, or is it first come, first serve?
Yeah, typically, so obviously this development will be professionally managed, and there will be an application process where applicants will apply on a first come, first served basis, and we always maintain a waiting list, and future residents of this development have to income qualify, and they also have to demonstrate strong credit, and they go through a leasing process and a screening process. It's just like applying to a market rate apartment, just with a few extra certifications.
Thank you.
To piggyback off that, did I read somewhere that there's on-site management?
There will be on-site management, yes. So there will be a full-time manager living at the project.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant? Ken?
I am wonder what the average rental cost in our city for 2-bedroom apartment. Do you know, Valley?
The HUD fair market rent. So this is just how HUD designates fair market rent within Orange County for a 2-bedroom unit is $1,800, and I would say that's probably a little bit low compared to some market rate developments in Santa Ana.
And I just did a very quick calculation, $32,000 a year, and average net income, gross income about $2,600 a month. After taxes, the family bring home less than $2,000, and the rent $700. I don't have anything how to survive.
Yeah, it's tough, and we obviously want to create as affordable housing as best we can, and work within the guidelines of the tax credit property.
Because in my opinion, for 2-bedroom for cost $1,400 a month, rent is about the average in Orange County. And in certain area, it's not considered affordable housing. If affordable housing for 2-bedroom, I think should be under that, lower than that. But again, that's your business decision.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant? Okay, hearing none, thank you. Appreciate that. Before we move on to the next step, I need to go back and make one comment here that I did not make earlier, and it has to do with the Planning Commission and its authority. Please be advised that the action of the Planning Commission shall become effective on the day following the first regularly scheduled City Council meeting after 10 days appeal period, unless, if allowed by the City of Santa Ana Municipal Code, an appeal to the City Council is filed with the Clerk of the Council, and a copy is sent to the Planning Department within 10 days of the date of the Commission's actions, or unless set for public hearing by the City Council. An appeal from a decision or requirement of the Planning Commissioner may be made by any interested party, individual, or group. With that said, Madam Secretary, have we received any communications at this point in time?
Communication has been distributed.
Thank you. At this point in time, I would like to open up the public hearing. If you wish to address the Planning Commission on this item, please fill out the requested speaker form. With the Secretary, comments will be limited to 3 minutes unless otherwise extended by the chairperson. We have a number of cards here. I'll start with Alan Wu.
Hello, I'm Alan Wu, a longtime resident of Santa Ana. I attended the Sunshine meeting and some of the other meeting with the developer. I have no interest in that property or their organization. I don't profit from it. I was struck, though, with their candor and taking all the normally when you haven't had development in a neighborhood for decades, and it's been kind of sleepy other than the industrial junkyards in the area and the best tamale shop in the world there, and a few retail stores that is in this development. This is first major development in the neighborhood. And they never promised a very low income, and they never promised extremely low income, but in reaction to the input from the community, I think they try to reconfigure things. So I'm just looking from the perspective that I'm kind of amazed that the developer looked at the in-grades, tried not to have the trash out in the neighborhood area, put in landscaping, put in some community access amenity, aware of the displacement of traffic into the neighborhood and the parking problems that we already have, and tried to address it in this thing. Not that I think it could have solved everything, and not the entire neighborhood seemed to be happy because it's so new. But we got to remember that there's some other planning pressures coming in. There's a community development corporation looking to develop nearby the train transit area and the train yard for OCTA will be built. This brings a little spark of sunshine on a little desolate corner that might also help us to look at the neighborhood a little differently. I work with a young youth organization, and we want to have pride in our neighborhood. We want to give them a sense that there's building for them that treats them with respect, and I'm hoping that the developer will do it. And the one thing that he said is that we will manage the property, which means they will look at the trash, and at least we're going to hold them accountable to that. So I think this is a developer that we can hold them accountable. If they're not, you will hear from us again.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. Lucy Serrano? Sorry.
Hi, my name is Lucy Solorzano. I'm part of the Artesia Pilar Neighborhood Association, and I'm here not only for my neighborhood association, but also as a resident who has family that lives in the area. I would like to ask the commission, have you gone to the physical site to see where this development is going to be made? Because the site is relatively small. When you're looking at putting multiple level apartments, we're already a dense area in that site, and I know, like Mr. Allen was saying, that there is maybe foreseen future development along the 5th Street. We are in favor, please don't get me wrong, our neighborhood would love and welcome redevelopment. However, we're looking at also wanting development that isn't too dense in our area. We are in favor of redeveloping Tiny Tim Plaza. Like Alan said, it has been ignored for decades. The area does need improvement, but we also want to be conscious of the level of traffic that is going to start going through our neighborhood. We are not in favor of multiple apartments. We would like to see a smaller building, smaller apartment houses. And I know I was listening to some of the comments that the developer was saying, and in regards to the low income, and Mr. Ken basically had it correctly, in that still $1,400 is still a lot for a family to be able to provide for the housing. You know, we're looking at community families doing more than 30% of their income for housing. And so what happens is that in our community, as you all know, there's multiple families, and that's what we fear. So I don't know if they have a mechanism that's going to be in place to prevent that from happening in regards to multiple families. So when we're looking at a 2 or 3 bedroom unit, we're looking at possible 2-3 families living in that space. And so we really want to make sure that those type of mechanisms are put in place. And before I leave, I just wanted to, also the when we did talk, they were very open, they were very willing to meet with us. But again, the manager that's going to be on site, their development agency is only going to supervise this for a limited amount of time. Our residents have lived there for 30 years. This is, a neighborhood that has long living residents. They're going to give their homes to their children who may or may not live there. However, we're here in the long run, so the impact is going to be felt by generations in our community.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. Pascal? Translation?
I can translate.
Ivan?
No, pues
Lo puedo decir aquí y yo ya lo repito para que lo puedan grabar.
Ok. No, pues es que es un lugar muy pequeño y para más apartamentos pues hay más gente, más tráfico y muchos niños pues van a necesitar de más cuidado para el tráfico que va a haber ahí.
What he's saying is that the place is a small property and the number of apartments is a large number, and that just means more people, more traffic, and that the kids that are going to be living in that development would need to have more attention in case there is more traffic. They would have to be on the lookout so nothing happens in that way.
Gracias.
¿Algo más?
Eso no, nada más.
Okay, that's it. He just wanted
Thank you,
to-
Pascal. Gilbert Esquivel? Gilbert?
How you guys doing today? I barely recently bought a house in the street that's on 7th Street, and I just bought it 2 years ago, and I really like the neighborhood. It's very quiet. Like they had said before, people have been living there for many years, and I bought it so that my son could grow up in an environment where people live in houses, and he'll have a better upbringing. And I think that having the apartments will bring a lot of unnecessary traffic, like, kids. It's already going to be a low income, so that's going to, it may get, like, there might be more violence, kids passing by and, writing on walls and stuff like that, and that's not the kind of environment I think that anybody who owns a home would like to have in their neighborhood. I think that maybe you guys can all understand that if you guys own a home. So, like, that's the reason why I bought a home there, is because it's actually a very nice neighborhood, and everybody that lives in there is, they're very good neighbors, and they're, I think we're happy the way it is now. And that's pretty much all I have to say. I'm not in favor for it.
Thank you, Gilbert. Simone Rojas?
The same thing.
Please come up to the microphone, please, if you would. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Simon Rojas. I am disagree with that project because a lot of traffic, a lot of problems. Many people go to smoking something, drinking. Imagine in the future with more people, more problems.
Okay.
And everybody's explaining the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Conrad Gallegos?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Commission. My name's Conrad Gallegos, and actually was a longtime resident of Santa Ana and also former cable commissioner here for the city of Santa Ana, and representing a lot of the elderly that are living in that area, especially my parents. And they have concerns about the project. Again, mainly that what's being touched on now is the amount of traffic that comes through that Fifth Street area. The Hawley Street area. You have numerous cars, semi-trucks, tow trucks that use Hawley as a cut-through. They cut through from Fairview or Civic Center, and they use that street as a cut-through, and they're going there at a high rate of speed. There's been numerous car accidents there of parked cars because those streets aren't very wide. And if you have two cars and two big-sized cars on either side, that street narrows. They're also concerned about the amount of parking that this project will produce. If you're looking at families, 2 to 8 people per apartment, you're probably looking at 3 to 4 cars within that complex. And on a just as an example, Thanksgiving, I had to park almost by Tinington Plaza, and my parents live right on Hawley and 7th Street. I couldn't find a parking. And there are, the crime, F-Troop is in the area. There's not a day or weekend that doesn't go by where my parents' wall is not tagged. And you can see tagging in this area. And it takes a while for it to get eliminated by the city. The noise that this traffic is going to create, a lot of these homes aren't created and weren't built for noise reduction. They have a lot of older windows, and with the amount of traffic that's coming through there, that noise is going to exponentiate, and it's going to affect the quality of lives of these residents. Also, with the pollution with the cars, you got, again, some of these older residents that are, their health is failing or ailing, and with the amount of cars coming through, it's going to increase the pollution in that area. And also on the notice, 500 feet, I know is by law by 500 feet with the notice on mailings, but a majority of the residents down on 17th Street did not get that mailing, due in part because of the 500-foot radius. And so some of these residents that are down there didn't know about the meeting, and if you look at the posting for the public notice, it was probably an 8.5 by 17 posting just on the corner, and if you blinked, you missed it. And again, just with the low income, you're going to get more people there trying to cover that rent, and that's going to be more traffic. And lastly, with the gangs, you're going to have these people trying to recruit these kids that are out there, and this is going to be a perfect opportunity. So I thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Conrad. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this time? Oops. Spoke too soon. Okay. Luga Fernandez? Sorry with the first name. I didn't. Lisa, wow. Didn't see that one. That's okay. That's right.
First
Thank you.
Here. Thank you. Basically, I'm just going to reiterate what Conrad, because I live kitty corner from his mom. And security, traffic, speeding, parking, and controlling the people that are going to be living in this complex, because low-income housing, I mean, I don't really think you would have multiple families in one apartment. And I almost get hit because I park on the outside of the street. I live on Holly, and because the cars are just speeding through, and it drives me nuts. Especially, it's even worse at night when the time changes and stuff. So, my main concern is I mean, it sounds really cool, but it's the traffic. Traffic sucks, and they're speeding. And many times I try to get it to slow down or get speed bumps, or even get a light, because I've talked to them before. Because 5th Street is bad. And there's been many accidents on there too. So that's really all I have to say. And Conrad said it well. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Does anyone else have any comment at this point in time? Okay. Alan, let me take the question, the speaker first. Speaker first. And then, if you would, when you finish speaking, fill out a card, please.
Yes.
Okay, state your name and where you are from.
My name is Zach Trevino. I've been an Orange County resident 2 generations back. My grandparents live here. I'm a student of urban planning currently, and I just want to briefly voice my support for this project, just on the basis of the fact that the overall housing crisis, larger than Santa Ana, but Orange County, but really encompassing the entire Los Angeles, Orange County, San Diego metropolitan area, there really are a lot of longtime residents that are having to leave because of the rising rents and increasingly expensive housing. You know, even though the population of the area does increase, and I like this project because it's not an example of gentrifying development or development that kind of increases the problem of lack of affordable housing. It really addresses that, and I do want to echo Commissioner Nguyen what he said when he mentioned that $1,400 doesn't seem really that affordable. And as someone that grew up in Orange County but has lived elsewhere, I agree. I think that I understand that the challenge for a developer to balance affordable housing and making a profit, but maybe somehow. Instead of from 30 to 60% AMI, maybe 25 to 65, so you can maybe capture some of those lower income families who aren't necessarily associated with crime, and make up the difference with the higher AMI. But anyways, just wanted to voice support for the project. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments at this time? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing this moment and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Anyone like to discuss or make a motion?
I'd like to, Mr. Chairman, if I may. I'd like to discuss, I'm not sure if we're understanding what the residents would be paying. They wouldn't be paying $1,400, they'd be paying $700. I live in an apartment that is not low income, it's $2,000 a month. I wish I was living in a HUD apartment, but I'm not, so it's really hard making ends meet. So even $1,400, to me, is affordable. So I wanted kind of just to, mention that, because it seemed like we were kind of misunderstanding that they'd pay $1,400, but they wouldn't. They'd be paying $700. So it's a percentage of their income. And personally, I've also been on HUD, and I know there were some concerns here with multiple families living in a low-income apartment. I can tell you that the management does monitor the number of families living there. And if I had somebody over and they stayed for a week, they'd be considered a resident, so they'd kick me out. So from what I understand, because again, I've lived in HUD apartment, I understand that they do monitor how many families live in an apartment. So I just wanted to point that out. And unfortunately, I'm not a homeowner. I know somebody said, maybe you guys are homeowners, you understand. I'm personally not. I hope to get there one day. So just wanted to open that discussion if we can, talk about really what low-income housing is. And when I got on this commission, my goal was to support low-income housing projects, because I also have the opportunity to be on the General Plan Advisory Committee along with my colleague Phil, and what the community asked for in all these meetings that the city had was we need low-income housing. So this is, to me, addressing what the committee is asking for. Thank you.
I just want to have a. I just want to have a better understanding what it qualify for affordable housing project in our city, because anybody can go in and I would like to use the state ordinance on affordable housing, 0.5 parking space per unit. By doing that, will be allow impact for the residents around the project, and I would like to possible to staff can able to, give us some explanation of what may qualify a project as affordable housing project.
Sure, thank you. I do think that's a really important question. Affordable in the context that we're talking about is affordable with a capital A. So it's part of a program that there's various funding sources for that distinguishes it from just building a cheap rent housing community. So when we use the word affordable housing in planning, we're talking about projects that go through a certain application process to qualify for certain types of funding sources, be it cap and trade or tax credit financing or a handful of other sources from state, local, and federal government, and then essentially commit for a certain period of time, usually 55 years, to maintaining the project at an affordable rate, subject to certain use restrictions and qualifications and monitoring and all the amenities that the various funding sources would require. So for example, in this project's case, the requirement for on-site management, the requirement to have certain amenities like laundry facilities, the requirement to have certain on-site amenities like playgrounds, courtyards, meaningful open space for the residents if it's family oriented. So that's basically affordable with a capital A, and it's important to distinguish it from a developer who are coming in and just saying, I'm going to build a project on the cheap, forgive the colloquialism, but just build a project on the cheap, and they would not qualify for the half a space per unit or all these different things that we're talking about tonight. If the applicant would like, he can describe all the hoops and hurdles he's jumped through, with the city to get to this point. But that's basically it in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Cynthia?
So in regards to housing, I remember when I was a UCI student, I got to rent, and they still are there, the apartments behind what's Trader Joe's now, and it used to be Lucky's. A roommate and myself, as students, we rented a room for $750. We're never going to get back to that. And the reality is that $1,400 for two college students, that's a deal. To be able to afford to pay $700, and I know that it might be a lot for many, but I know close friends renting their 2-bedroom apartments for $2,100, and I'm like in shock. So $1,800. It's tough. It's just our reality, and we do need affordable housing, and this will touch some families that have been looking for that relief. And if we can provide that, I think that's a start in the right direction. So that's my 2 cents on housing. My other question was in regards to the traffic. It looks like it's an existing condition already. It's not new, and it's not due to the new project that's coming on board. It's existing. So I don't know, has there been any efforts already looking at Fifth Street to do street bumps, or any traffic mitigation, a light? I mean, is there something that we can cut off, before it becomes worse?
Tig?
Hi, good evening. I'm Tig Higgins with Public Works, Traffic and Development. We are not considering a light at that particular location. It wouldn't be warranted. But what the city is doing as part of a central city complete streets project, we're looking at 5 corridors through the city. One of them is Fifth Street, and in particular, what we're looking to do is calm the traffic, slow the speed down, and actually provide for bike lanes, more parking, and that kind of thing. And that'll include this stretch of Fifth Street.
So what specifically would be done?
Most likely, in front of this property in particular, if you visited, you might have noticed that the street is actually overly wide. And so at this segment, right on this frontage, we would narrow the street, and then And then again, long-term, we're working on the circulation element to reclassify the street. And so we would have, instead of 2 lanes each direction further west of this area, say in front of the Templo Calvario, we would actually go down to 1 lane each direction. The amount of the daily volume out there is nowhere near what it should be to justify 2 lanes in each direction. So we would allow for more parking and bike lanes, 1 lane in each direction, and then a 2-way left turn lane.
So-
all of that, I'm sorry, just 1 second. All of that serves to slow the traffic down. That's the biggest complaint we get for Fifth Street.
And in doing that, that means the street will be repaved, because the street needs
It
just as much as the area that the streets
not
need.
necessarily, but usually that's when we do it, when it's repaved. We have a whole separate program for when the repaving of streets happen. You know, we might just get out there, sandblast the existing, and put in new. But
Because it's been like that as long as I can remember. It's pretty bad.
yeah, as I say, we have a program for restriping the streets for analyzing when is the most cost-effective time to repave streets. This project will do paving on their frontage, their half of the street, but the rest of Fifth Street will be, you know, as part of city project, and there will be a little bit done as part of the streetcar. But that's it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Before you leave, can I ask you a question? So what would you say that the city's investment in public works for the infrastructure around this property is?
Oh, a dollar value?
Is there any?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So you're saying you're not going to improve the streets.
We will.
But you're going to extend the sidewalk to narrow Fifth Street.
Yes.
That's a public work expense.
It's the developer's expense.
What's the city's expense to improve the infrastructure, to slow down the traffic and improve the streets in that neighborhood?
I don't have a dollar value. I mean, what we've done as part of this Complete Streets project is done some planning work on Fifth Street and the others, and then the next step is we apply for funding through active transportation program and others.
So it's in a plan. It's in a plan, but not one that's been monetarily approved. So there's no funding.
There's no
any of that.
funding for that Complete Streets. I can tell you we've been extremely effective at getting these active transportation program grants. I think we've been one of the most effective in the entire state. I would say over the past 3 or 4 years, we've gotten about $30 million.
That could happen today, though, even without this project.
Without this project, yeah.
So
Yeah,
what's the plan to do that? What's the timeline plan for that for Fifth Street?
It will happen after the circulation element is complete, and so the next funding cycle is in spring of 2018, and so we'll likely apply at that time for Fifth Street.
Likely or will?
I say we likely will. We have to go through council. We're going to provide a whole slate of projects to council to approve.
Looking forward to seeing that happen.
Sure.
Thank you.
Tell you one question before you. So, I mean, technically there's nothing budgeted, but this could be budgeted in 2018 if you went after the appropriate grants, is what?
It likely wouldn't happen that soon. We would apply for it. The best case scenario, we'd apply for it sometime in 2018. Typically, it's about a 6 month period before the California Transportation Commission decides on it, and then usually the funding is for an out year. It might then, I think best case scenario would be we'd get funding to start the design on it like in about 2019, and then we'd do the design and then construction maybe the following year.
What's the speed limit on that, on Fifth Street right now?
That's a good question. I think it's 35.
So if you put in bike lanes, it would be 25.
It would likely slow down maybe to 30. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. You know, we would put the improvements in and then restudy it, and then we have this 85th percentile. We do an analysis, and depending on where the average speeds come in, that's how we can set the speed limits.
Okay. Any other questions of Public Works? All right. Any other comments at this time? Do we have a motion on this mitigated negative declaration environmental number 2016-165, general plan amendment 2017-02, and the amendment of application for number 2017-03 for the Tiny Tim Plaza project?
I'd like to, Mr. Chairman, make a motion to approve the mitigated negative declaration environmental review number 2016-165, general plan amendment number 2017-2, and amendment application number 2017-3 for the Tiny Tim Plaza project located at 2223 and 2237 West 5th Street.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Any other discussions at this time?
I will not be supporting the motion, and I just want to say the reason why. First of all, I am a huge supporter of affordable housing. I always have been. So it very much breaks my heart that I'm not going to approve this project, because I've always been a supporter of affordable housing. Also, there's a complete need for the shopping center improvements. I didn't grow up in the neighborhood, but my grandparents lived there, and we spent summers at Tiny Tim or walking there to get snow cones, and so I'm very, very familiar with the area. I'm very familiar with the shopping center. There's a very much need for the improvements. So again, it's very hard for me not to approve, because I know these will bring much needed improvements. And then thirdly, I appreciate the developer taking the time, listening to the community, making the adjustments based on community feedback. And so I really appreciate that. We saw this at design committee, and I have no objections to the layout or the design of it. I do have a problem with us making amendments to general plan land use elements when the infrastructure does not support that. The traffic and the everything in that neighborhood, and shame on the city for not making those improvements beforehand. Shame on us, because that neighborhood has had to deal with the corrosion of the streets. They've had to deal with the recycling plants and the junkyards. They had to deal with the neighborhood problems, and I really think that the city could have done a better job in preparation of this. So shame on us for that. So at this time, I'm not in favor of making any kind of amendments until we improve things in that neighborhood to accommodate a project of this magnitude, so we can have affordable housing. I know that the units are big enough to have families, but again, there are problems in that neighborhood. There are gang problems, and it is a true statement that you bring more youth into a neighborhood that is plagued with some problems and criminal activity, and it's just going to contribute to it. So I'm not going to be responsible at this time for any of that, and so that it breaks my heart. I'm so torn between both, because I really do like the project. I just don't consider that at this time it's I can be in favor of making general plan land use element changes. Thank you.
Any other comments? Ken?
I am echo Commissioner-led Venino on the project. I feel uncomfortable with the amendment on the general plan on when the CL City is not ready for that development yet. And also, I do have problem with the limit number of parking that we available for the project that will create a significant impact for surrounding neighborhood. And also, I also I just did a Google check on the average rental income for Santa Ana in 2-bedroom in Santa Ana is between $1,600 to $1,800 a month, which is your price proposing very much about the same in general, even the brand new project and everything else. If a resident with low income, will be even difficult for them to able to afford. The proposed rent payment for the income family 4 for $31,300 for $700 is still quite high. And if any family with that low income, I think they should be able to qualify for Section 8 or something like that of a City for Housing Assistance. I do applaud and the developer on the interest of development of city, but I will be feel more comfortable if any development project in our city, especially residential, will create more parking spaces for the project, and for that I will be more than happy to support it. But again, I have to support the Commissioner Lynette decision on this, and I cannot support this project.
Any other comments? I'd just like to say that, again, I think that we're all pretty much in favor of the concept of the affordable units in the area, and I think even some of the speakers have talked about it. And as much as I share Lynette's concerns, I mean, this is the unfortunate situation where I think the developer has taken and is really making a bold move in this particular situation to put something in there which really does help the neighborhood, or does help, change that neighborhood. And I think it's bold on the part of developers, and we're trying to encourage people to come in and do good projects in our city, do projects that are affordable as well as market value. It's a tough situation, and I think that I've heard the comments and heard the understanding, and unfortunately the city does have to live up to trying to do things to improve. It would be nice to be able to do that. So I'd like to just leave it with that. And if there's no further comments, we'll take a vote at this point in time. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, so we have 3-2. Okay, thank you. This is the time and place for the public hearing on item number 2, conditional use number 2017-22, to allow the sale of alcoholic beverages for the premise consumption at Sushi Near Me restaurant located at 3701 South Harbor Boulevard, Unit F. Do any of the commissioners have anything at this point in time that they'd like to disclose on this item? Ivan, will you, who's okay, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Planning Commissioners. This is an application for a conditional use permit to allow the on-premise consumption of beer and wine at an existing sushi restaurant known as Sushi Near Me, located at 3701 South Harbor Boulevard, Unit F. As previously mentioned, this is a conditional use permit to allow the on-sale premise consumption of beer and wine. At this time, there are no tenant improvements being proposed at this location. The subject site is located on the northern western portion of the city along the border of Costa Mesa. The site sits within an existing industrial office complex, and it does also include some additional retail uses within that complex center. This is an existing floor plan of the location. As mentioned, there are no tenant improvements being proposed at this location or at this time. The applicant recently acquired the business couple of months ago, but the restaurant itself has been operating for quite some time now. All the alcohol storage will be stored and displayed within the areas in the map shown as red, so it will not exceed the storage and display area allowed per the city's municipal code requirement. This is a site photo of the location. Again, it's within the corner of this structure, and it does have some outdoor seating as well. The proposed establishment, or the existing establishment, currently meets all of the city's requirements. The restaurant and the sale of alcoholic beverages will provide service to the community. The alcohol and beverages will contribute to the overall economic success of this small business, and the city's current regulations will ensure that this operation and restaurant will continue to operate in a satisfactory manner, and it will not create any attractive nuisance to this location. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve conditional use permit number 2017-22 without any conditions. And that pretty much concludes up the presentation.
Does the commission have any questions of staff? Hearing none, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Ken?
Could you tell me what the concentration of the liquor license in 1 square mile in the area, surrounding area?
Commissioner Nguyen, I don't believe we have that information handy today. That's not a requirement. Over-concentration issue, it's not a requirement of the on-premise licenses, so we don't typically have that information handy at these meetings. We can dig it up and follow up with you if you'd like, but
that's okay.
Over-concentration
It's just
of
one
on-premise licenses.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? All right. Would the applicant like to discuss this item at this point in time? Is the applicant here?
I believe the applicant's not present today.
Okay. Madam Secretary, have we received any correspondence on this?
We have not.
Okay. All right. We will now open this for public comment. If anybody wishes to speak to the Planning Commission on this item, please fill out a request to speak form with the Secretary. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes unless extended by or granted by the chairperson. Are there any public comments at this moment? Hearing none, we'll close the public comments. Bring it back to the Commission. Do I have a motion to consider item number 2?
Chairperson McLaughlin, I'll recommend we adopt a resolution approving conditional use permit number 2017-22.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Cynthia. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. This is the time and place for public hearing on item number 3, modify conditional use on conditional use permit numbers 2014-19 to allow the expansion of the Network Brewery into the adjacent suite located at 1824 and 1826 East Carnegie Avenue. Does the commissioners have anything that they wish to disclose at this point in time? Okay. Staff, Ivan, please go ahead with your presentation.
There was a slight issue with mine, so I'm just going to locate it really quickly. Sorry about that. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. Up for discussion this evening is a modification to an existing conditional use permit for Network Brewery, which is currently located at 1824 East Carnegie Avenue. As I mentioned, this is a modification to an existing conditional use permit, and what The application before you this evening is for the reason that the brewery is now expanding into the adjacent commercial space at 1826, and therefore requires a modification to the CUP. That is essentially all there is. They've outgrown the space that they're currently located into, and the demand has also increased, so they need extra space. The brewery will now be a total of 3,000 square feet. Each tenant space is equal size. And as I mentioned, this requires an approval of the modification for the CUP. Wow. I can pull up the updated version if you'd like, because that's going to make a big difference on that. Is that okay?
Do what you have to do.
It's essentially the location of this establishment is south of the 55. As you know, we have a portion of real estate south of the 55, and it's primarily industrial. Pretty much the location of the unit itself is at the end, minus the 1826 unit. So they'd be taking over the end of the building there, and it sits on Daimler Street, which is a cul-de-sac. As I mentioned, it's primarily industrial. The manufacturing brewery use is consistent with all the other uses in the area. Yeah, you know what? Let me pull this up because it's...
Ivan, just commissioners, it's page 312 of your packet. There's a color photo in there if you want to pull that up also.
The picture here, thank you, Sarah. The picture essentially is the front of the unit. It sits, as I mentioned, at the end of the building, and it's located right in front of the parking. It's on Exhibit 3, I believe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this actually works. As I mentioned, the brewery is located at 1824, which is the second to the last unit on the building, and they're expanding into the last suite at 1826. And I don't know what's going on, but I apologize for that. What the goal here is to expand, and I think Exhibit 5 will show the floor plan, is they currently have a small tasting area which is allowed or permitted through the Type 23 ABC license with the state. And what's going to happen when they do expand into the adjacent suite is that the tasting area will increase slightly, but it won't increase more than what the 5% allows for the dedicated tasting area, which is similar to all these other ABC licenses that are in our city. The rest of the space will be manufacturing and office space and 2 full ADA compliant restrooms. So a little bit about the application before you is essentially that the expansion will not be detrimental to the health and welfare of any person residing or working in the area, as it is consistent with the industrial uses. Also, the proposed expansion will allow not only the business owner to remain competitive with the other microbreweries in the area, but allow him to produce a unique craft. As you know, each brewery has a different motto, taste, goal. And then as conditioned in the resolution, you'll see that the conditions that are placed on this application will allow this small manufacturer to comply with all the Chapter 41 requirements. With that, staff recommends that you approve modification to conditional use permit 2014-19. The applicant is here before you this evening, so if you have any questions as far as the operations, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer those. And with that, staff concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does the commission have any questions of staff? Okay, thank you, Ivan.
Thank you.
Would the applicant like to state something at this point in time?
Hey guys, I just wanted to say that this has been an honor trying to represent Santa Ana, and I'm really excited to kind of get us into a competitive brewery aspect, especially since Orange County is in the top 10 regions in the United States for breweries, and Santa Ana, obviously we can try and make a name for ourselves when we have competitors like Anaheim and Costa Mesa that are really trying to expand. But yeah, I'm excited.
Great.
That's it.
Any questions of the applicant? No? Thank you. Okay. Madam Secretary, have we received any written communication on this item?
We have not.
Okay. We will now open up for public hearing. If you wish to address the Planning Commission on this item, please file a request or speak with the Secretary. Comments are limited to 3 minutes unless otherwise extended by the chairperson. Would anybody like to make any comments at this point in time? Hearing none, we'll close the public comments and bring it back to the Commission. Do I have a motion to consider item number 3 at this time?
I do.
Ken?
Like to motion to approve the modification to conditional use permit number 2014-19 as condition to allow a type 23 alcohol beverage controlled license to expand into the adjacent tenant space for Network Brewery located at 1824 and 1826 East Carnegie Avenue.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
I second.
Second, Patrice. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Okay, thank you. At this point in time, we will move to our work study calendar. We have one work study session. Please note that there will be no motion or action taken on these items. First item in the work study calendar is the Madison Mixed Use Development located at 200 North Cabrillo Park Drive.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I'm here just to introduce the Madison project and to receive some feedback from you regarding the proposed project before it goes to hearing. The project location is 200 North Cabrillo Park Drive. The entitlements that are associated to the project is a site plan review and 2 variances. Just to give you some background, the project location is within the Metro East Mixed Use Overlay Zone. The overlay zone was approved in 2007. It comprises of about 200 acres of property, predominantly office currently, and it's intended to ensure a vision of walkability, pedestrian-oriented environment where you would have mixed-use properties of higher densities and higher intensity uses. So the arrow pointing to the property is the subject site, which is on the west side of Cabrillo Park Drive between the Xerox building and the State Fund building. This gives you the context of the site. It's currently vacant. To the north is the State Fund building, which is an 8-story office building with 6-story parking garage. To the south is the Xerox Center building, 16 stories and 6-story garage. Across the street to the south, to the east, on this photo, it's barely on the photograph, is the 1901 project, which is a mixed-use development of 254 units and commercial uses. And then obviously to the west would be the Interstate 5 freeway. Again, the project was approved back in 2015. The table shows the differences between what was approved in 2015 and what's currently proposed. In 2015, it was a 6-story mixed-use residential with 217 units, including 4 live-work, and approximately 6,200 square feet of retail. The parking garage was 2 levels and had 444 spaces, and then it shows the amount of open space, private and publicly available to the project. The proposal on your right shows it's the same site, but they are increasing the height of the building, 1 level, 1.5, to add lofts, 260 units, so it's 43 additional units. They still have 4 live-work units proposed, 6,500 square feet of retail, so an additional 300 approximately square feet. They are only adding 1 parking space difference, but another level of parking garage, which will be subterranean. So you can see the difference in the parking ratio between the 2015 approval and the current proposal. And they are adding more open space areas, both public and common private. This gives you the previously approved site plan showing the parking structure occupying a majority of the site, of the westerly portion of the site, and then along Cabrillo Park Drive would be your 2 retail components, which are colored in pink, your live work units, which are the orange color, and then your green area, which is the leasing office. So you can kind of tell how the entire site is pretty much built out to the max. This is the proposed site plan, showing still the commercial live work component along Cabrillo Park Drive. The parking structure has shrunken to accommodate a fire lane along the south and westerly part of the property, which is required by code to provide fire access. But overall, the circulation and project layout is predominantly the same. This is a comparison of just the elevations off of Cabrillo Park Drive. Again, the layout and the materials are pretty much all in the same configuration. The only difference visually would be, slight modifications in the height, moving up to another story, and then some of the materials applied throughout the building. The issues before you would be that they are proposing two variances. One, again, for the parking reduction, going from 2 spaces per unit to 1.71 spaces per unit. And the applicant will further discuss the proposal, and they would like to receive some feedback, concerns, comments from you regarding this particular issue. The other variance is for a side yard setback. The MIMU currently requires a maximum 10 feet, and they're proposing 30 feet in lieu of 10 feet along the southerly side of the property, and this is to accommodate the fire lane. There was a sunshine meeting held last year in November. 5 community members attended. The primary concerns were related to circulation and traffic conflicts. Otherwise, the community members were predominantly in support of it. The adjacent property owner, who owns the Xerox tower, has concerns and conveyed concerns about queuing and traffic delays. The project is required to provide a traffic impact analysis, which they have submitted and was reviewed through our traffic division. And the adjacent property owner has expressed some concerns with that traffic analysis. The project is scheduled for Planning Commission hearing next in December, and that will go before you at that time. This concludes staff's presentation. And again, the applicant would like to have a short presentation to kind of discuss the variance, particularly the parking, but then also go over, some of the amenities and the project itself.
Let's first ask the commission if there are any questions of you.
Okay.
Anybody? Okay. No questions, so if the applicant would like to speak at this point in time, that'd be fine.
Should. I think this is full screen, but if not, there you go.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Larson. I'm principal with MBE and Partners, the architects on the project. And we just thought it'd be important to introduce the project to you a little bit before we get into the meat of the discussion, which is probably analysis of traffic and parking. So just wanted to walk you through the major features of the project once again. Some of the major materials on the project, as Jill had mentioned before, similar to what was originally approved. We have metal paneling in a sort of zinc application, and then Corten, some surrounds around windows in Corten steel. We have areas of vertical planting on walls, and then we have a cementitious fiber. It's a wood-like material. We've been using this, and the architects have in other applications around the area. It's very durable. And then we have areas of plaster in several different colors. We have railings in both glass railings and in perforated metal panels, and then we have aluminum window frames. The major design concept or organizational project concept for the development is a series of outdoor rooms. And I wanted to walk you through the features of the project by walking you through plans and renderings of those rooms. And we'll go from Cabrillo Park Drive edge which is more public edge, and lead gradually more to the private edge, interior to the courtyard and the back as we move through the project. So the what we're calling the front porch in the leading edge here, and also the foyer, are public spaces. So the front porch is about 45 foot from back of sidewalk to the building, and this has includes landscape, paving, a variety of benches and seating areas, all at street level. This is fronting the retail spaces, the live workspace, and the leasing office. And then there are some stairs that take you up to approximately 20 feet up to an overlook that we call the foyer. This is still a public space, accessible to the public, and then by the stairs, and then there's also an elevator that brings you up to this space. The view from Carrillo Park Edge here, so you can see in the white is the leasing office at the center, and the stairs leading up to the foyer. And then just to the right of the leasing are the live work units, and you can see framing on the right side, the retail space, and then in the left edge of the image is the other retail space. Up above, you can see the white bar kind of showing you, we have 2 rooftop deck amenities, and so there's one on each wing of the building, so on the north and the south edge. And then up on top of the foyer space, so this is 20 feet up once again, this is a public space accessible to all. Gives you a view of this sort of framed opening that looks into the private courtyard beyond. This has a bridge element that takes you across at the 4th and 5th levels and capped by this large sunscreen element. And this is a point where it will be secure after this point for residents into the courtyard space. And then the 2 rooftop amenities, as I mentioned, there's one on the north and one on the south. The northerly one is a bit more kind of conversational, a little bit quieter set up. The one on the south is a lot more activated, socialized. There's a barbecue and a bar and fire pits and those type of elements open to the sky. This is a view from of the south one, so you get to see there's a variety of seating arrangements, view to the sky, backdrop of the barbecue in this view. And then heading into more of the private area, so this is the point that leads you into the courtyard space that's at the podium level. This is our pool area, and then part of what we call our living room area. So the pool area is flanked by a lounge and club room and the fitness on one side, and then the pool and a spa serve that space. And then as you lead into the more central part of the courtyard, we have another what we call living room space, which is more seating, has an outdoor fireplace, and more barbecues. This is a view looking from that pool area edge into the central courtyard space, and you can see the club lounge flanking the pool area. Then as we move further to the west, kind of at the end of the courtyard space is our kind of patio area and den, what we call, and then the family room. And this is the end of the space and captures, once again, more seating. At the very end of the courtyard space is a water feature that we have setting up and capturing that end view. This is a view looking into that courtyard space. This view is straight across from the lounge club room. The pool is just off to the left, and then you can see the living room space just off to the right and headed down the courtyard. This space is enlivened by the many outdoor decks and terraces that we have, and in the far right you see we also have some loft units, mezzanine lofts in the 11 of those in the project. And then sort of finishing with our last space, call it our backyard space. Different than what was originally presented, our building sits underneath all of our units, so this space is on grade. This is a space that's secured from the front street area and accessible to residents at the back. It's about 25 feet up from the freeway. Actually, the edge that you see right there is the off-ramp for the 4th Street. So the freeway is still another 60 feet or so from the back of our property edge. And our property along, or our building along this edge is anywhere from 30 to 60 feet back. And then this is a view if we're sort of levitating above the freeway edge there about 25 feet. We're almost at eye level with our level of our property. In the foreground, you see the large wall. That's the existing retaining wall there for the 4th Street ramp. And then our building beyond. And really what we've taken is this isn't our back. This is still a front view for us. So we have enhanced materials here. We have minimized the windows that face directly to the freeway edge, and also not included any decks in this area. So we have sound attenuated glazing in this area. And then this leads us back to kind of towards the front, the Xerox Drive edge. So this is the drive that we share with Xerox Center, and shows us leading into the parking garage for our residents and guests at this location. Kind of in the centerpiece there is that pool courtyard beyond, below that green wall. And then just kind of a brief overview. We color-coded the areas here again. All in the blue is open access to guest parking, so there's not a gate or anything that leads you into the garage. The gates happen between the blue and the green. You can see 2 points there, little circles that transition. Those are security gates between that parking in the blue and the resident parking in green. If you go in the northerly one, you come down and you go up to a level of parking above. And if you come in the southerly one, you come across and you go down to the parking level below. And I would like to go ahead and turn it over to Lynn Scott Law Greenspan to kind of walk through some of the analysis of traffic and parking for you. Unless you have any questions for me at this time.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Good evening, Chair McLaughlin, other commissioners. My name is Rich Barretto with Lynn Scott Law and Greenspan Engineers. A little background on us. We're a traffic and parking firm. We're about 50 years old right now. We were engaged by the applicant to do the original traffic study back in 2015, and since then we've been brought on board to conduct the updated traffic analysis that the City Public Works Department, the Planning Department would need with the redo of the project, and then as well as provide some parking assessment as it relates to the proposed parking supply for the project. As Jill had mentioned, there's a variance, or there's a reduction in parking from what is required currently under the mixed-use overlay zone. Relative to the traffic study, again briefly, looked at 15 intersections and 8 roadway segments in the immediate area of the project, focusing on intersections along 1st Street, 4th Street, and Tustin Avenue, as well as the ramp intersections at both the 57 and the 5 freeway. The study area is consistent with what was evaluated back in 2015 and what was required by the Public Works Department to assess the change in project description. Also included in the analysis was an evaluation of the intersection of Xerox Center Drive and Cabrillo Bark, as well as, like Jill had mentioned, there were some issues or a comment that came from the adjacent property owners regarding queuing and stacking for the project as it relates to the project driveway. The traffic study that we did prepare addressed that issue. We were made aware of some of the comments that the adjacent property owners have brought to the applicant's attention and the city's attention, so we'll be diving into that a little bit more and making sure that we're addressing those comments as the project moves forward to the December 11th Planning Commission. Briefly on the traffic issues, the intersections in the immediate area with the exception of one based on 2016 counts that we had done at the start of the project, result in acceptable service levels as it relates to the city's LOS criteria and methodology for assessing intersection analyses. The project was looking at, per the city's requirements, we looked at the project's direct impacts on the system as it exists today, as well as an opening year near-term assessment looking at 2019 conditions, and then also as the city requires a build-out condition. Overall, the project would contribute significant impacts to a long-term condition for which the project would be responsible for paying a fair share of those improvements as required by the Public Works Department. Relative to queuing and stacking at the intersection, we find that based on our analysis as it stands today that there is adequate stacking and adequate queuing at that driveway, and that intersection of Xerox Center Drive will continue to operate at a really good service level. We did coordinate with the city, City Public Works Department, and just discussing or developing the scope of work and any comments that they may have had on the report as it has made its way through the system for review. Relative to parking, I think Jill's slide identified a ratio of 2.0 or a prior ratio of 2.05 for the prior 2015 project, which in our assessment back then met the city's current mixed-use overlay parking requirement. The project as proposed right now is slightly less. It's at 1.71. So we've been asked to assess the implications of that parking ratio overall. So our approach to looking at the parking for this project was not necessarily validating the 1.71, but to evaluate if the supply proposed would be adequate to accommodate the 260 units, the current mix, as well as the retail component of about 6,600 square feet. Our approach on looking at those, validating the supply is similar to any of the studies that we've done where we have a unique, not a unique situation or a unique situation or a use where the ratio may not meet a city's parking requirement, and so we go and do field studies. In this particular instance, our study is based on evaluation of similar sites, 12 in total, of which 6 LLG has been involved in relative to evaluating the parking requirements. And those parking requirements were done based on field studies during peak weekday conditions as well as Saturday conditions. And they're all over. They range in Santa Ana, Fullerton, Monrovia, Pasadena, Irvine, Mission Viejo, as well as Laguna Niguel. Briefly on that, we found that for at least the 6 studies that LLG was involved in, there were another 6 studies that are sourced within the parking study we prepared that another consulting group had completed for a project in Orange. But relative to at least the studies that LLG was involved in, the ratios that we found for those similar type projects in a similar setting range from, let's see what I have here, 1.22 to 1.48 spaces per dwelling unit. Okay, our assessment of the parking of the data that we've compiled and at least are included within the parking study we've prepared show that at least on a design from a design standpoint, the 95th design standpoint, percentile design standard, we're coming up with a ratio of 1.61, which is less than the applicant's 1.71 spaces per dwelling unit. So from that standpoint, we've concluded that the parking supply, as proposed in the project, would be sufficient to meet this type of project within this setting, provided that again there's a parking management plan that's prepared to kind of identify how the spaces are going to be allocated for studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, live-work product, as well as identifying where guests or retail customers would be parking, for which I believe the screen up front that Jeff had pointed out shows at least their initial design on how that would be allocated from that standpoint. So that kind of concludes at least the parking and traffic overview that we've prepared for the project, and I'll be here to answer any questions that you guys may have as you guys mull over what you've heard so far.
Does the commission have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you mentioned 15 intersections.
Yes.
It seems a little too much. Where else other than like First and Fourth and Carrillo? And
So the study area that was identified is consistent with what we looked at back in 2015. And the intersections range, again, I apologize, I didn't have these slides on here, but I think we're all kind of familiar with the area. So it ranges from Tustin Avenue all along First Street, First Street all the way up to the SR 57 southbound ramp. 55 southbound ramp. And then along 4th Street, it's obviously the on and off ramps to 5th Street, and then all the way stretches across to the 57 on and off ramps. And all of them are primarily signalized intersections, and then along the Cabrillo Park corridor, we add Xerox intersections to evaluate. On top of that, we looked at roadway segments, but really it's just focusing around this area since the project has been evaluated, I believe, as part of the original mixed-use overlay assessment when the city went through this process. So the city Public Works Department wanted us just to verify as this project moves forward if there's anything in particular that this project will create in terms of significant impacts based on current conditions as they exist today.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I've got a question with regards to the study.
Sure.
It's one thing to go back to 2015, but right now I'd like to say that the First Street is becoming a little bit of a hot commodity at this point in time for development. And one of the discussions we have right now, we've had one project in front of us already, which is over 400 units at First and Tustin Avenue. And next to that, across the street, there's another one that's coming up, which I believe is another 300 or 400 units. Vince?
That's close to 600 units.
600 units, so we got 1,000. And then we have 1901, which is already in place.
Sure.
And there's likelihood going to be other. So how do we assess the true traffic projections
Yeah.
of where we are today versus where we're going to be 2 years from now at this point?
Sure. So relative to the 2015 study that I had referenced, it was for the prior project that Jill had mentioned when it first came forward. Actually,
'Cause that's your prior
Yeah,
project. Right.
the prior project. Now, the current project that we're assessing does evaluate current conditions and cumulative development in the area. And I believe the projects you had mentioned are included within that setting. So when we do traffic projections, we look at open year conditions, which includes projects that the city had identified within the area in terms of development. Then also we look at build-out traffic projections, which means everything else beyond what's in the immediate area, but what may happen outside of the city that would contribute additional traffic growth to this area that you're talking about, primarily along First Street and 4th Street corridor that we're looking at. There were 19 development projects that we had considered as part of what we call cumulative traffic setting. So beyond just this project being developed, there are 19 other projects that were considered. And of those 19, 11 of them were within the city of Santa Ana.
Do we have that?
Lion Communities was one of them because when the 1901, because when we first initiated work on this project, the 1901 project was not quite completed or not quite fully occupied, so we included that as a project, regardless of what the status was at the time. Sure. First Street Family Apartments was the other one that we had included. I believe it was the affordable housing development.
Yeah, I don't know all the list of all of them, but any project that's in our review process gets included in this cumulative list that they study, and they factor in the traffic for those when they start doing all their number crunching.
So can we, since this
Wormers is probably part of that one too.
Pardon?
The Wormers project by the zoo, a couple of the AMGs that are down East First Street. AmCal. So.
Yep.
So will we have that information presented to us when we do the presentation for this particular?
Yes, it will be part of your packet. It is actually currently posted on the website as well. The traffic analysis and their appendices.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other
So,
questions?
in a nutshell, we've made sure that we've included those type of developments in the setting. So we're looking at other development other than just the Madison within the setting that you're looking at.
Patrice?
I have one question. I'm not sure if you can answer or the previous speaker, but the proposed was 260 units, approved was 217. And I know you mentioned lofts. Are the lofts one bedrooms or? I'm sorry?
Yes, they are one bedroom and then plus a loft.
A loft, okay. I mean, did you make those accommodations based on what wasn't approved, or did you have in mind the lofts?
There were no lofts before, so that was just an accommodation to create a little bit more variety in the offerings.
Thank you.
I'm going to go back to go to parking at this point in time.
Sure.
One of the things that I didn't mention it earlier was some of these projects, the AMG projects that have been noted, those are affordable housing projects. And as we talked about earlier, we're talking about situations where one is a 400-plus units of affordable senior housing, which is a half a parking space per person. And then you've got across the street the 600 units, it's about a parking space per person. And there was talk about parking off-site and everything else. If I remember this project, when it came up the first time, there was discussion about off-site parking being potentially either the state fund building and or the Xerox building.
Nope.
Nope.
I'm not aware of it, but.
Good evening, Chairman, Planning Commissioner. My name is Bob Bisno. I was the original developer, and now I'm part of this development team. I do not recall any proposal for off-site parking. We've had conversations with our neighbors, but it's never manifest into a proposal.
Okay, I mean, maybe it was just based on conversation, but I know that there was discussion about the fact that some of the public parking that was available for the any kind of retail that was in the building was very limited on the original proposal.
We might have had that conversation, but it's never gone any further than that.
Okay, just needed to verify that.
And Mr. Chairman, we wouldn't have asked for it either because at that time that project met our parking requirement. So we would not have gone above and beyond asking for that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions of the applicant? All right. Vince?
I got just one comment clarification. I know one of the issues here that had pending is parking they talked about there, and you have the 1.71 that Richard talked about versus the, I think the 1.8 that Alina had mentioned. You want to cover that real quickly? But they're trying to get a good read on where your level of comfort is for parking for this project, because it is kind of a critical issue with them as we move forward. So maybe Jill can give you some background on the whole parking issue. I know we've been here for a while and appreciate your patience. Maybe give us about 5 more minutes. We should be done here.
So the city is currently undergoing a review of parking reduction, an overall review of parking requirements citywide, particularly in Mimu, because we're looking to expand the Metro East area west of the 5 freeway, and that also encompasses the Warmers project, which is right across from the zoo. And essentially, we're looking at reducing ratios based on parking demand as opposed to just a straight number. We have received a draft parking study done by the consultant, and right now it's looking at 1.8 being the demand based on surveys of other cities as well as some projects in Santa Ana. And the difference here is that they're proposing 1.71, which is just short of that, and that's where we're trying to get a read of what the commission is currently feeling, if that's an okay description of that.
Beatrice?
Could you do me a favor and go back to that sheet where you had the 2015 approval and then proposed? It was a really good cheat sheet that, to me, I think, told me a lot, but I didn't get the bottom portion of it.
I get it for you. Was it the first sheet, Jim?
Yeah, I think it was that one. Okay.
Thank you.
Open space, public open space.
View. Oh, down. Here it is.
So the fifth bullet down, the project actually required 434 spaces, and they were providing 444 in 2015. The parking structure was much larger. They were only proposing 2 levels, but with this proposal going up a story, the fire department, Orange County Fire Authority is now requiring a fire lane along the south and west side of the property, which then diminishes the amount of parking structure they can have, which then they have to go down a level and still try and accommodate as many parking spaces as possible for those units, which is why they are proposing a parking study to show that the demand is there to adequately address the amount of units for the project.
And I'm sorry, and for the open space per unit, what is considered open space in that development? I mean, it looks very dense. Is it per unit?
So
Open
the
space per
requirement
unit?
is for public open space, 15% of the site for publicly accessible open space, which is predominantly along Cabrillo Park Drive, and it leads up into the 3rd floor of the property in that stair open space. The private and common is shared between balconies for each individual unit, and then also the courtyard and the back area of the property, which is double used as a fire lane with some greenery and some, areas to, maybe take your dog out or recreate, run around the property if you so choose to. So they do have 360 access from a pedestrian standpoint.
Thank you.
So Jill, so if we didn't approve the parking variance, they'd be required to stick with the 2015 approval, or they'd have to start all over in order to be then eligible for the new parking standards.
There are a few options. Would be to park it according to code, which is the 2 spaces per unit, or reduce the number of units to accommodate the amount of parking that they're proposing. I guess those would be your options.
My position is that I'm not willing to sacrifice the parking at this time. I was comfortable approving it in 2015 with the amount of units it had with the parking then.
Jill, the applicant asked for 2 variant, first parking, and what the second variant?
It is for a setback along the south property line. Right now, the way that it was built out in 2015, it was all the way up to the property line, which our Metro East standards say 0 to 10. And because of the fire lane, they have to accommodate a greater setback, which, hopefully with the Metro East expansion, we're going to modify those requirements so that it's not a hardship on the property. But in this case, because they're proposing more than what is our maximum, they do need to apply for the variance.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments of staff? Okay, thank you, Jill.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Let's move on. Staff comments at this point in time.
Just a reminder that we'll have a reception, a holiday reception before our next meeting, December 11th. We're going to start around 4:45, so see you all there for the last meeting of the year. We'll do it here at 147. Yeah, right nearby.
Any other comments, staff? Okay. Lynette? Ken? Beatrice?
I just want to say, and I know some of my fellow commissioners might not agree with me, and I wish all of us were here to hear this, but I've only had 2 hours of sleep last night, and I know it's a very long meeting, but I really want to encourage my fellow commissioners to read the whole packet before we come to the meeting, because some of the questions that we ask are in the packet, and they kind of do slow us down a little bit. And I'm sorry if I'm being a little harsh, but like I said, I only slept 2 hours. I was reading my packet. I have 2 little ones. My youngest one is 7, just turned 7, and we're all here, putting our own time. We don't get paid. I don't know if the public knows this. I mean, we get a very small stipend, and so I just wanted to reiterate that how important it is for us to read the whole packet. I know in one of the last meetings where we had a lot of public input, one of the audience members asked, "Do you guys even read your packages?" And I think they kind of noticed that some people probably don't, and some people maybe read them when we're here. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, my one comment has to do with, I think, when we went through this first discussion on affordable housing, I think that it's not, we're here to talk about land use and everything else, but the discussion came up on, what the boundaries are, what's the different levels of affordable housing, and I think maybe it would help if we had a refresher in a work study aspect of kind of hitting the high points, the key points of each level. Just by virtue of the fact that Ali came back and said to us, well, it's not really 1.0, for parking, it's 0.5 now for affordable. As it was stated earlier, and I think we all have to understand, is the fact that affordable housing has become a hot button, not just in the city of Santa Ana, but in the state. And the state's doing a lot of, legislative work to do what they can to continue to grow affordable housing, and they're trying to keep people in the state and everything else. So I think we're trying to do our part, but I think if we can at least get through a brief discussion of what are the boundaries of what we do from an affordable housing perspective, whether it's a Section 8 or just affordable housing, I think that'd be a very good work study. And then it might eliminate a lot of the discussion that we have throughout the meeting with regards to, well, what is the price of the affordable housing and everything else and how we deal with that. So that's my recommendation at this point in time. Okay.
I definitely agree with that also, because in one of the meetings when we voted on an affordable housing project, one of my questions was, do they pull from the Santa Ana housing list? And I know one of the questions from the commission was, is it HUD? Obviously they all work together under HUD, and being on the housing list for Santa Ana is Section 8 housing. So
right.
It'd be good if all of the commissioners, we were again on the same page and learning more about how it works.
Agree. And I think the second thing is that I'd like to know, when is the plan for this parking study to be done? Because my understanding was Public Works was going to have that. You're pointing this way over to, pointing at Vince?
And I'm pointing back to Ali, because
I was
working
going to
with the
say,
consultant there.
this
It's
is
a little
the point.
triangle here.
Yeah,
We have, as Ali mentioned, we have the draft in our hands. Yeah, sure, come on up. Let's make the meeting last a little longer.
Even though Beatrice had 2 hours of sleep, and I'm just reminding you that because she's been kicking me under the table.
I'm sleepy too. The city hired a firm to conduct a parking study for primarily the Metro East area to see if we are off our rockers with 2.25 parking spaces per unit, or if we are correct. And so the study is not going to be a code amendment. It's going to be a menu of options that the city and its policymakers can consider either all at once or piece by piece over time to offer incentives for reduced parking or keep parking the way that it is right now. So we have a very, very technical draft in our hands that we provided comments on. The consultant is marking it up, presenting an administrative draft, and when that gets shared, that will be made for basically public consumption. So
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. With that said, no other further comments at this point in time. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.